Dudley Rutherford tells a story about Robert, a member of his congregation in California. And Robert was closing up his jet ski shop one Friday night, and he made the decision to leave the demo jet ski attached to a chain and a post and leave the sign on it that said, "Rent me." And of course, he came back on Monday morning, and the inevitable had happened. The jet ski was gone. And he checked with the employees, and nobody had taken it inside, so they realized that it had been stolen. But it wasn't long after that a police detective called him up and said there was a man who was arrested with a DUI this weekend. And when they ran his registration, he was driving a van that had been rented and had been 30 days late in return, and he had a stolen jet ski. So Robert, of course, was thrilled to know that had been located, and the police detective demanded that he press charges. Robert said, "Well, he think about it." Well, it wasn't long after that a man named Steve showed up at the jet ski shop, and he said that he had stolen the jet ski. And he apologized. He planned on bringing it back, but he'd gotten arrested, and he was going through a divorce, and his life was just crumbling around him. And so Robert thought he really didn't feel like it was the right thing to do to pursue action. And so he made a deal with Steve. He says, "Steve, if you go to church for the next 3 months, then I won't press charges for the theft." And of course, Steve was appreciative of that, but the police detective was furious. He said, "It's not like 3 months in church are going to do him near as good as 3 months in jail." But nonetheless, Robert had made his decision, and he watched Steve walk into church the very next Sunday. And Steve, he learned about Jesus. He learned about mercy and grace and forgiveness. And it wasn't long after that Robert watched Steve walk right down front. And he surrendered his life to Christ. And immediately he was baptized, and his sins were washed away, and he rose up out of that water transformed. Isn't that crazy? Here's someone that's life was falling apart, but Robert introduced Steve to Jesus, and Jesus changed his life forever. And that 3 months, that was a long time ago. Steve's still coming to church. So my question to you is, who's Steve in your life? Who has God put in your life that you can introduce them to Jesus and have their life transformed? And maybe you're Steve. And if you're Steve, then I want you to know the love that God has for you. He loves you so much that he sent his son here to this earth to die and to rise again so that your life can be transformed. So during this communion time, I want you to think about the Steve in your life. And I want you to reach out to him or her and share with them what you know about Jesus. Because Jesus has shown us love. He's shown us grace and mercy and forgiveness. It's enough to transform your life for all of eternity. So let's prepare our hearts for communion and remember the sacrifice that he made for us that transforms our lives as we sing.